Story 1. We made a deal with my 95-year-old grandmother that when her car gives out, she needs to stop driving. My father disconnected her car battery a month later, and the car was sold because she thought it had actually died. It was not right to lie, but she was going to cause an accident if we let her keep driving. Story 2. My brother and I met with our mother's doctor and told him what was going on. He had her come in, did some tests, and told her she no longer qualified to drive. He was obligated to take her license. I have no idea if this was legally true, but it worked and kept her from being upset with me or my brothers. Story 3. When I knew it was time for my grandfather to stop driving, I made arrangements for all of his transportation to be taken care of. I would go grocery shopping for him or take him there. We made sure he had a ride to his appointments. It is not easy having that conversation, but elderly drivers cause more accidents than intoxicated drivers. Story 4. You just have to make the decision and stick with it. After a certain point, it not only endangers themselves but also other people on the road. My grandmother was angry, but she was safe. She eventually got over it. Story 5. Where does he need to go? Before you tell him he cannot drive, figure out how he is going to get there. Then present him with the plan. You are going to have a frank and honest conversation with him and take the keys. We had to do this to my grandmother at about 80. She threw an absolute fit, but she got past it. Story 6. Neighbor's dad was too old and had poor eyesight. When the license renewal came in the mail, they tossed it. About a month after the license expired, they asked him if he had renewed it yet. No, he hadn't. Since it expired, he had to go to the Department of Motor Vehicles for a test and eye exam. He knew he couldn't pass the eye exam, so that was the end of his driving. Story 7. This is my experience with one blind and one dementia grandparent. I tried explaining how they could harm a child, but they thought the odds were low to just run somewhere quick. I tried making being driven around seem more like a luxury, something they had earned, plus more time with relatives, but they valued their independence more. In the end, no one intervened, so the dementia grandparent drove into a tree. Luckily, he wasn't seriously injured, didn't injure anyone else, and the car was totaled, so they couldn't drive. In hindsight, I wish my family had been strong enough to take their keys and car and deal with the consequences, because it would have been better than waiting for an accident that could have been much worse. I really hope you have a better experience. Story 8. We always used to say, if you crash and kill yourself, that is one thing. What if you go left of center and take out a van full of children? Want to live with that? Story 9. One of my grandparents willingly gave up driving. Her car was kept for a few years so we grandchildren could use it to go to the store. After a few years, the car needed some work and was sold. On the other side, one of my cousins died. His partner, a single mother raising their 2 children, had her car break down. I told my other grandparent that since her car wasn't used much, it would make a significant difference for her great-grandchildren. It was hard for an 80-year-old to disagree with that. Story 10. If you are in the United States, what state are you in? Some states allow you to report elderly people for driving problems. They may have to get retested and possibly provide a letter from their doctor. If your reason for wanting this person to stop driving is that they no longer have the ability to do so, you can ask their doctor to raise that concern. Here is information from the Virginia Department of Motor Vehicles on how to report an elderly driver for assessment. It might help you determine your next steps depending on your state. Story 11. We told my mother she had put enough effort into driving and it was time to pay someone else to drive for her on the rare occasions she needed to go somewhere. It was also easier because we explained that it was simpler and cheaper to get items delivered than to go to the store. That was all the driving she really ever did. It was not easy. No. Story 12. As someone whose car was hit by an elderly man on a fairly empty freeway, please stop letting elderly people drive. Story 13. We disabled my father's car when he developed dementia at 85. We also removed all the firing pins from his guns at my mother's request. Story 14. I had an uncle who showed the first signs of dementia. He would start weaving on the road. My aunt would say, "It's okay." I just reach over and help him steady the car. We had the doctor contact the Department of Motor Vehicles to pull his license, But the only thing that stopped him was taking all the keys and a couple of parts off the engine as a precaution. There was a lot of shouting and threats, but we all slept well afterward. Story 15. It is about keeping your 95-year-old safe, but more importantly, it is about keeping everyone else safe, especially the children. My mother started to decline, and I took her car keys away. She asked for them back, and I told her, "No, you were going to kill someone." She cursed at me for the first time in my life. I also wrote to the Department of Motor Vehicles in California, and they allow family members or friends to report an unsafe driver. So I did. They sent a letter to my mother telling her she needed to get a doctor's note confirming she was okay to drive. No doctor would have signed off on that, and then she would have to go to the Department of Motor Vehicles and be retested. She figured she'd just drive anyway. She called a tow truck, had her car towed to the Toyota dealer, and told them she needed a service and had lost her keys. My sister told me. I called the Toyota dealership and told them she was going to kill someone in that car, and they would be responsible. They towed the car back to her house, no keys. She had a phone number for a locksmith in the kitchen. So I took the car and gave it to my niece. She never drove again. Within 1 year, she was living in assisted living. You have to be brave and responsible, and the person will not like it. That's okay, you might just save a life. Story 16. Please suggest alternatives. If you always had a dedicated driver on standby, would there be any reason to drive yourself? I do not think Uber or public transportation are valid alternatives. From what I have seen, older people with limited mobility tend to go out less, and that starts affecting their energy and sense of engagement. Story 17. Everyone is saying to just take their keys away, but do they have any support? How are they getting their groceries? Who is taking them to their doctor's appointments? They need to have options for transportation. You might be able to first decrease their driving if you offer to drive for them or arrange rides for them. Story 18. My grandfather was furious when we took his keys away at 94, but 2 months later he admitted he actually felt relieved. Sometimes the freedom we think we are losing is already gone. We just need permission to let it go. Story 19. When my wife's grandmother was in her early 90s and started showing signs of dementia, we went to her house and disabled the car by disconnecting the battery. This was after the doctors said they could not take her license. Because of her mental state, this worked. I could see how, if someone were more aware, it would not work. Story 20. When my great-grandmother reached that age, my grandfather tricked her. He had a friend pretend to be a driving instructor and told her that by law she had to be tested after a certain age. Then he took her license. It was in a small town in the south. I am not sure if it was illegal, but it worked and she was not mad. Story 21. There is no sugar coating it. It needs to be done. Now, the real question is, will there be family to help drive the 95-year-old around? I grew up in a retirement town, so this is an issue I have seen firsthand. You go to the grocery store early on a weekday morning, and they are backing into cars and going over curbs. It is chaotic. Just stand your ground and know that you have saved this person from hurting themselves and someone else. Story 22. A long time ago, my coworker asked me to help with his grandfather, who was over 90 years old and needed to stop driving. We were 3 adult males present when the old man started throwing punches after my coworker took the keys. His wife then drove away with the car. We had to physically restrain him to prevent him from hurting himself or others. He was very angry and incoherent. He was also legally blind and used to drive every Sunday with his wife, who guided him when to turn. The family was afraid of him, and no one dared to say anything until he crashed into his own fence. He died some time later, and my coworker said he did not speak to anyone in the family from the day they took his car. Story 23. My mother will go into deep depression if she cannot drive. It is the independence and option to drive that she needs. Using a ride-sharing service will not satisfy that, and family being available is not feasible. Even if we were available, it still does not fit the need. It is a really tough issue. Story 24. A family member took the second set of keys, followed her to the grocery store with a large parking lot, and took the car while she was shopping. They gaslight her into believing she must have parked illegally and that her car was towed. This was before cell phones, and the retirement community had a shuttle service. You could pay a fee to access pre-scheduled drive times, and the family offered to cover that cost for her. Her daughter already had power of attorney, so she sold the car. My other grandmother was easier. She accidentally missed a stop sign 2 houses down and had a minor fender bender. She turned off the car, left it in the middle of the intersection, walked home, and said she was done driving. At the time, she sat on phone books to see over the steering wheel of the large Cadillac. Story 25. I know it sounds mean, but hide his or her keys. There are a few times in life when deception is morally justified. This is one of them. Story 26. My grandpa started experiencing blackouts in his early 60s. Once while I was in the car with him, I managed to pull the handbrake, moved him to the back seat, and drove us home. I was 13 at the time. Luckily, my dad had me driving the 2 blocks to the shop since I was 11. Otherwise, we would have been stranded in the dark with no phones on a very quiet road. He gave me the car keys the next day and said they were mine now. I think the thought that he could have killed me was the catalyst. Story 27. I dealt with a case involving an elderly woman. Adult Protective Services was involved so that the family could serve as a neutral party. We sit on an elder abuse committee, and the chief of police assisted. They spoke with her, identified concerns, and then allowed the family to have a meeting with her. They reached an agreement that the family would drive her to where she needed to go if she gave up her vehicle. The police initiated the removal of her driver's license. I do not remember the details. Story 28. We had negotiated taking away my ex-wife's grandmother's car. Easy, my son would get his first car for a very reasonable amount. We were going to go up Sunday to get the car. Saturday she went to the casino to play bingo. On the way home, she somehow flipped the car onto its roof. My son was the one who cried that day. Do not negotiate. If he should not be driving anymore and will not agree to stop driving, take away the keys and disconnect the battery. Story 29. Thank you everyone for the fabulous response. Has anyone found a way to help them run their errands and maintain their independence other than putting yourself behind the wheel and becoming a chauffeur? Story 30. I work in aged care and see this constantly. Families can talk to their doctor and ask if they can speak to the elderly person and recommend they do not drive. Sometimes hearing it from someone else helps. If not, can someone disable the car or disconnect the battery? If it is your parents, perhaps just take the car away. Are you their power of attorney? I am so sorry this can be so hard. Story 31. Make a plan to help them get where they need to go, so they do not feel like they are asking for help or left stranded. They do not want to feel like a burden or helpless. Make sure you talk about it and let them know they are loved and supported. Involving medical professionals can be helpful since they are typically trusted, and their advice is followed. You are taking away their independence, and it will affect different people differently. From personal experience, check for and secure or remove firearms or other weapons they could use to harm themselves or others. When my grandmother in her mid-80s gave up her keys, my wife, who works in elder care, became her driver. She went over 2 to 3 times a week to take her to counsel on aging meetings, grocery shopping, and out to lunch. She was paid for this, but it was also a wonderful bonding experience. My wife's uncle, on the other hand, had his license taken away by his wife and doctor. When he got home, she went out to run an errand, and he committed suicide and also killed their pet cat on the living room couch. Story 32. My grandfather is almost this old, and he just passed the California Department of Motor Vehicles driving test again. That says more about how low the California Department of Motor Vehicle standards are than how good his driving abilities are. He does not have the reaction time to be driving anymore, and it is only a matter of time before he gets into an accident. But what can you do when the only reasonable way to get around in this country is by car? Story 33. Hide keys and send the Department of Motor Vehicles a request for driver re-examination. Give them alternatives to get around, like Uber, Bus Pass, or any local senior program. If they lose their license, try to convince them to sell the car so they will not be tempted to keep trying to use it. Story 34. Unfortunately, we recently went through this with my father-in-law. My sister-in-law and mother-in-law spoke privately to his doctor, and she filed the paperwork to revoke his license. It is a tough situation but absolutely necessary. Story 35. My grandma drove when she was still in her 90s, and she was not a good driver. One time she knocked off at least 2 side view mirrors of cars on her street, which was really narrow and, for some reason, not a one-way street. My dad and his siblings all tried to get her to stop driving, but her response was something like, "If I can't drive, I'll D." It was not until her health declined and she was no longer physically able to drive that she finally stopped. She was still driving at nearly 94 years old. By the way, she lived until she was 98, so clearly she did not need to drive to live. I realize this is not very helpful advice, but I hope you were able to find a good solution. Story 36. I cannot convince my 65-year-old father not to do yard work in 98-degree temperatures at 2 p.m. because he believes doing it in the evenings is lazy. Story 37. Take the keys. Sabotage the car. Get his doctor involved in telling them it is time. Then make sure every time they want to go somewhere, a family member is present to do it. Story 38. We privately told his doctor our concerns, and he raised them with my 89-year-old father at his next appointment, who accepted what he heard. He was sad but understood. Story 39. If you do not want to go through the doctor getting a note to give to the Department of Motor Vehicles, just hide their keys and take the battery out of their car. Then offer to drive them. Done. Story 40. Where I live in New South Wales, Australia, my 95-year-old father has to have an annual medical check and a practical driving test every 2 years. Thankfully, we will not be the ones telling him he has to stop. Story 41. Replace their keys with similar-looking keys. Remove their battery. Teach them how to use ride-sharing services if necessary. Story 42. Take the keys away and shut down every argument they come up with. My grandmother got pulled over for swerving and almost hitting a bus full of children. Too old to care or understand. Take the keys and save some lives. The elderly cannot drive, and they are too stubborn to admit it. In my humble opinion, if the elderly did not drive, we would all be less stressed on the highways. Story 43. 1. Talk to them about their safety and the safety of others. 2. Come up with solutions together on how they are going to get to the places they usually go by car. 3. Take away the keys. 4. Take away the car. Story 44. You have a friend who says that they are with the insurance company, and to reassure him, they need to do a test drive with him. A few days later, you tell him that the insurance company called and they will no longer insure him. This actually happened with a real insurance company and my mom, who passed the test, but it is a good way to get him off the road without you being the bad person. Story 45. I have this conversation a lot with patients and it is never easy. Usually, I try to explain why it is not safe and they agree until the next visit. Story 46. Is money an issue? If not, show them an Uber or Lyft experience. Regarding the money aspect, show them an UberX experience. Nice clean car, etc. Story 47. Just show them that South Park episode where people are getting run over by senior citizen drivers after they all meet at the community center complaining about losing their driver's licenses. It hits the nail on the head with that episode, but in a funny way too. Story 48. In most states, you can report an elderly person for re-examination yourself, or you can talk to a family doctor or a police officer. Story 49. In my state, the Department of Motor Vehicles has an email address you can use to notify them. They send a letter with a form that must be completed by the type of physician they specify, a neurologist in this case. The form asks if the person is safe to drive. You must return the form signed by that doctor, or your license will no longer be valid. Story 50. Just take their keys. We did that for my late grandmother who kept going out even though her Parkinson's disease was at a point where she could not drive well. My uncle took her keys. She threw a fit but got used to it. Luckily, my maternal grandmother decided the new car has a computer, and she does not like computers, so she stopped driving. My grandfather said he is willing to give it up when the time comes. Story 51. In Texas, and I believe other states, you can ask the Department of Motor Vehicles to retest an elderly person. If they fail, they lose their license. This will not necessarily stop them from driving but will prevent them from driving legally. Story 52. Take the keys. This literally prevents them from driving. If you cannot find the keys, then rotate a few distributors so it will not start. Story 53. By the gods, I'm going to read every single comment on this thread. I am so scared of having to do this. Story 54. Don't you have doctors who tell you if you are fit to drive a car or not? Here in Norway, once you contract certain ailments or reach a certain age, your doctor needs to verify that you are still fit to drive and give a time-limited seal of approval, usually 5 years, after which you need to be checked again to verify you are still capable. If you are declared unfit, your license is suspended and you can no longer drive. Story 55. Unfortunately, we need to address the issue directly. It will take a significant event for them to agree, and it is not worth the risk to them or to others on the road. You will spend too much time with the limited time you have left with them arguing and negotiating. Story 56. Yes, my grandmother quit driving at 94 this past year. It is basically not an option because the laws changed in her state. Story 57. I am going through this right now, original poster. Unfortunately, there is not a lot you can do. Get as many doctors as possible to say in writing that he or she should not drive and give the specific reasons. Dementia, Alzheimer's disease, diabetic neuropathy, and as many reasons as possible. The Department of Motor Vehicles is not good at taking licenses away. Give copies of those statements to the Department of Motor Vehicles to try to get the license revoked. In many states, just taking their keys is illegal. It is considered stealing. We tried it and had the police called on us. We were told to give the keys back or they would send someone to retrieve them. Disabling their car is vandalism. I removed the batteries from his key fob, then put clear packing tape over one of the terminals. My goal was to stall until the Department of Motor Vehicles steps in. Is this still illegal? Yes, but my chances of getting in trouble for a key fob are much less than for a car. Please let me know what you find to be most effective, as we are still going through this. Story 58. I reported my dementia-ridden late 80s father to our Department of Motor Vehicles, and they wanted him to do another driver's test. He messed up the dates, so he never took the test. He probably would not have passed it. Despite all the arguments with him, he kept driving. All I could do was give him rides whenever I was available. He had done a lot of mechanical work when he was younger, and that knowledge never left him, so disabling the car was not really an option. The day before he died, he drove to the store and to visit his sister in the nursing home. He told me he was short of breath and had to pull over. I do not know what else I could have done to stop him. I appealed to logic, got his license revoked, and provided him opportunities so he would not need to drive, yet he still kept doing it. Story 59. What you cannot do is rely on the system, such as the government, local authorities, or the medical system, to help you. There are some success stories, but in my experience, no one wants to make that decision or deal with the consequences. You must be honest with your family and make other plans. Can be a difficult conversation, but it is important. The issue with places like the Midwest United States is that everything is far apart. Taking away someone's ability to drive also takes away some of their independence and opportunities for socializing. Whatever plan you create needs to include more than just getting groceries. Story 60. Random outlets were removed, and now there is no outlet in the upstairs bathroom for phones or hair dryers. Additionally, several of the bedrooms have only one outlet in very inconvenient locations. Story 61. My grandmother, bless her heart, got her license renewed. This confused everyone because she has not driven in over 3 years. She told us the only reason she renewed her license was to drive the car to my sister's place, which is less than 2 kilometers away. She wanted to surprise my sister with her car. Story 62. Tell the person's doctor your concerns about their continued driving. Give specific examples. Their doctor cannot share information with you unless you are authorized, but they can listen to your concerns. Story 63. Most places have mandatory tests for drivers over a certain age. If they keep succeeding, you are wrong. If they fail, their license is revoked. It is that simple. Story 64. My grandfather drove until age 98 and was great at it. Are you sure she is worse than the 16-year-olds who are just getting their licenses? Story 65. An elderly person hit 2 grandparents who were walking with their grandchild. I wonder what the consequences of this will be. The elderly wife still drives, and there is nothing we can do. Both elderly individuals are taking medications like Targin. They should be given a drug test. Story 66. Why? Are they incapable? Do they have poor eyesight? Have they been in accidents recently? If the answer is no, then I am not sure why you would think they need to quit. I have met a few 90-year-olds who would outdrive any 18-year-old new driver any day of the week. Story 67. If he has the money, have him buy a Tesla. The self-driving feature is not perfect, but it is better than him driving. That works to preserve his independence while making everyone safer. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.